Welcome to Sober on Purpose. We're in the middle of a women's health series, taking care of yourself, your self-care, so you can take care of others, especially when you are dealing with folks in recovery and loved ones who are going through addiction. I am here with the host of She Considers a Field. This is Anna McLaughlin, and She Considers a Field comes from Proverbs 31.
That's right.
So Anna, you want to share a little bit more about yourself?
Yes. Hi. I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Tanya. So I lead a women's group on Facebook, and we're looking towards the fall to start a podcast as well. And effectively, I share my journey of healing and wholeness and finding full restoration in all areas of your life at the feet of Jesus. So I come from a background of some relational challenges and inner healing needs. I was a corporate lawyer and found my way to a life of much more simplicity and joy. And I just love sharing the different bits of wisdom that I've collected on the way that have led me to where I am.
That's so awesome. Before we started recording, we were laughing about the Proverbs 31 woman that you either really are annoyed with her and all that she does, or sometimes when you gain that understanding of who actually reads the prayer and what it's supposed to be, then you're very
Yeah,
blessed by her. And I was going
that's
through,
right.
yeah, I'm supposed to stay up late at night, get up early in the morning, give my maidservants food, and then make sure that my kids are all dressed in is scarlet or purple, I can't remember which it
Yes,
is,
something
and
great.
bring
I
in the
know.
fine linens, and then have all the spices and food, and then make sure my husband is settled and well
Mhm.
respected at the city gates. I'm like, who dreams up this stuff? So give us a little more understanding, Anna, of why you chose the name you chose for your group.
So my kind of I was right there with you. Like when I was first coming to know the Lord, I was like, this chapter stinks. Like I don't like anything about it. It just felt so burdensome and heavy. And what I know now after 30 years of walking with the Lord is what that woman represents is a woman who is fully walking in her competency, in her abilities, and enjoy, honestly, these good relationships, this good household, this good, well working kind of microcosm that she has built in her home, where she's got a lot of skills and gifts, and she's putting them to work. And I think what we so often miss is that this is not some sort of heavy burden that the Lord's trying to lay on our shoulders. It's actually a promise of when you look to me, when you put me first, and when you seek to be faithful, like the parable of the talents talks about, which is one of my life passages. When you seek to be faithful, this is actually who you become. And it may not play out with ships and cloths and weaving and things like that, but you will actually step into the fullness of who you were created to be, and you will have incredible impact in the kingdom of God.
And that is so that's the focus of the Dancing with Joy program, is how do you become the cherished wife? How do you do less,
Mm,
connect more? How do you build the family legacy so that it's a God-centered family for your children's children? So there's laughter, there's joy, there's all of those
yes.
pieces. And as I began to dig into Proverbs 31, it is so in the Jewish tradition, the wife is the one who sets everything in motion for the Sabbath evening, for the rest, for her
Mm,
family, for all of those things. It's very family centric, but is the husband that reads Proverbs 31 over her as a blessing, not as a to-do list, but as a
mm,
blessing for her. And that switched everything for me. It wasn't what I needed to be, it was a
mm.
blessing for me to come into my fullness, as you were talking about. And
It's
when I'm
amazing.
looking at your bio, Anna, you're doing all kinds of things, but it didn't start that way. Give us a little
No, it did not.
history of how you got on this road.
Sure. So for me, I was raised in a non-Christian home. Everybody was doing the best they could, lots of well-intentioned love and care. But I was very intuitive. I was very kind of emotionally geared, and there were things that I just felt the unrest. In a home that doesn't have Christ, there is only so much rest you can kind of muster. And so I felt that deeply. I was gifted a Bible when I was about 10 years old. And I remember kind of devouring it and going, here's the man I kind of always knew, but I didn't know his name. So when I encountered Christ, there was a real sense of homecoming. So I became a Christian when I was 11, but there was so much relational brokenness, so much damage, so much generational healing that needed to take place. And so, really, for me, even as a Christian, I had about a decade or so of deep, deep brokenness, just bad choices, didn't know how to clean up and resolve conflict when it came. And so in my mid 20s, I really didn't know where else to go. I was bright, I was in law school, but I had very few friends, no close relationships, nowhere to really go in my struggles. And so I got to a point where I asked the Lord to take my life, and it was the first time I really got honest, because in my mind, well, I'm a Christian, things should be getting better and better, and I should be learning more and more and growing more and more and being better and better. And really, I was just heaping these burdens on my back because I wouldn't come to the Father. I didn't feel like I could truly tell him, you know, I'm lost. And so my
Mhm.
early 20s, I couldn't take it anymore. I said, please take me out. I spent a summer asking him to take my life. And when he didn't, I was like, okay, if I have to be here, if I have to get up tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, I said, fall me back in love with you again. And that was the beginning of really kind of my new life, I like to say. And now it's been about 17, 18 years of this um, very gentle process of the Lord leading me to see his face more clearly. And that's what I love to share with other people now, because so many of us, I think, walk around like the walking wounded, feeling like we're just burdened by shoulds and ought tos, and we miss the goodness of the Father.
And I love it. Fall me back in love with you again. Fall me
Yes.
back in love with you again. And
Hmm.
that's what we talk about in the program and on the Facebook group is we go to resources. Drugs and
Yes.
alcohol
Yes.
work. Workaholism works.
Hmm.
Getting more awards, getting in political office, all those things work until they don't work.
Yes.
And it sounds like you hit that point. Fall me back in love with you again. Then what happened? You're kind of leaving us on the edge. But you didn't take your life. You're still
He didn't
walking
take my life.
around. You still don't like the
Yes.
Proverbs 31 woman. And you're like, okay,
Exactly.
so what's next there?
Mhm, mhm. So it was a journey of many different pieces, and the first steps. I mean, honestly, the first step was honesty, right? The first step was admitting I couldn't. I've done. I've been in Al-Anon and Coda, and I'm so grateful for the 12 steps, because it really um, gave me words around the process that the Lord at that time had already begun to bring me through, and that he
Mhm,
brought me much further through the course of my time in the program. And I think there's something so powerful about that initial honesty of it's not working. It's not working, and coming to believe that there is something bigger than me that I
mhm,
can depend upon when I can't depend upon myself. And ultimately that I am living my best life when I'm depending upon God in all things and at all times.
mhm,
Um, and so the Lord kind of brought me on a road that involved many different things. There was deliverance and inner healing prayer, kind of soaking prayer by prayer ministers. There were some practice with boundaries, and where do I say no? How do I say no well? There was a process of ending relationships that weren't serving, and being willing to walk away, including a mentor relationship that I had really come to believe was my path to salvation. That
mhm,
if I'm good with this person, therefore I'm good with God. If I don't manage to maintain this friendship, then by definition I have somehow turned away from the Lord. And so that process was very integral. And then even little things like, am I sleeping enough? Am I drinking water? Am I allowing myself to rest? Because I think when we're in this process of realizing all is not well in my life, we can kind of become self abusive, where it's like, I got to get better and I got to work harder. And the Lord so often does his work through rest. So that was a really pivotal, albeit very very kind of ordinary piece of my healing as well. I had a lot of hormonal challenges as we started having children, and during those years, we had 4 kids in 6 years. And at the end of that period of time, just felt crazy. Well, it turns out my body was just beat from all of that pregnancy and
Right.
birth and everything that came with
Right.
it. And I didn't know. I was so focused on the spiritual. I'll just pray harder. I'll get deliverance ministry. I'll go up to the front every Sunday. And God was like, take a nap. Like, just like, allow yourself to rest.
Yes, yes. There is a book, if you haven't read it, there's a book called Messy Christianity. And that's
No, I'll
one
write
of
it
his
down.
whole chapters. And he was a youth minister, or maybe still is. One of his whole chapters is take a nap with Jesus.
Oh,
It's a whole chapter about that. So there's a lot of things in there that my audience would be really interested in. So when we talked in the beginning, you're like, Tanya, I don't have an active addict in my life. I'm like, that's okay. You've got a lot going on. When did you stop saying, like with the mentor relationship of the external is not going to fix me? I have to take responsibility. I have to turn to God.
yeah. So it was, my husband was a huge part of my healing. I was very kind of type A driven. I was a corporate lawyer. I mean, you work hard and then you work a little harder. And then, anybody who's talking about how hard they have it, somebody else was up till 6 in the morning that day. And so it was a
Right.
very,
Right.
it was a wonderful law firm for a law firm, but it's a very intense type of profession. And then I meet this guy who left his white collar job to become a CT tech, which is more of a tradesman's job. And he spent the weekend on the boat with his friends, and he didn't own a book other than the Bible. And he was a C student in high school and college, and he was so happy. And I was like, huh, that's really interesting. You seem normal. And he just loved me, and he loved me through my pain. So he looked at kind of the life I had built, and he started holding up a mirror for me. He would say things like, oh, I feel really sad because I feel like that person was being really rude to you there. And oh, I'm worried about you because you don't seem like you're getting a lot of sleep. And he just was so grounded and so loving
Mm-hmm.
in his treatment of me, that it was an invitation for me to risk, and it felt like I was jumping off a cliff, to risk saying no to a relationship that felt very unhealthy and abusive. I felt unliked, like not like there was love, but there was no like in that relationship. It was all about, if you behaved better, then I would treat you better. And but I wanted to grow with God, and I thought that that relationship was the path to do that. And so it was through his love of saying, I like who you are, enjoy you, let's go watch a movie, let's have fun together, that I was willing to risk saying, I'm going to trust my walk with the Lord enough to say, I it's like, I'm going to trust that he loves me enough to keep me growing with him without it being absolute torture. And so it wasn't like I was walking away from, our idols become bitter pills to swallow the longer we
Mm.
live with them. They're cold comfort. They don't give us what we want. And so it wasn't like this was like a cozy blanket that I just wanted to keep forever. I was miserable. And
Mm-hmm.
but I was scared I would lose God. And so it really took my husband's love to be able to trust myself and say, I think I can be in relationships where I'm well liked and still grow with God at the same time. I don't need to abuse myself to grow with the Lord. So it was a whole mindset shift for me.
Boom. That's huge. So,
Yes.
so you walked away from the performance-based love, if I was
Yes.
to give it a name, that if I do this, you will love me more. If I don't do that, then you will turn away from me, which is nowhere near what God's love is like. But
Right.
but in your mind, you had concocted, correct me if I'm wrong, I have to go through these trials and sufferings to keep staying close to God. Am I kind of
Yes.
tagging that?
That's right. Yeah, it was a lack of trust in my own relationship with the Lord. Like without this almost Catholic model of, I will tell you when you're wrong, I will tell you when you're in sin. I thought I would become faithless somehow, not for lack of love of God, but just lack of trust in myself. And so, or, well, yeah, lack of trust in myself, but ultimately it's the Lord that holds us. And that was the risk that I took in my mid 20s, was that I would actually find God through saying no to things that really didn't feel good, you know.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as we're looking at that, you were talking about idols. In the world of addiction, we almost make recovery an idol. That if they would just, if this
Mhm.
person would just quit, if they would go to this rehab, if they would make it through this, then I can be happy. Now,
Yes.
is that kind of the situation you had set up of, if I could just achieve this at the law practice, if I could just do this, if I could just do this, then I will be closer to God? Am I hitting the target there, or is it slightly different from that?
So for me, it played out as if I perform whatever the thing was in front of me, if I find a way to um, you know make that mentor relationship work, if I find a way to navigate my relationship with my husband better, then he'll love me enough to give me his peace, right? I must not be living in peace because I've missed the boat, because I'm doing something wrong. It's my fault. And so that self-condemnation, I thought was like an indicator that I needed to change my behavior, when really what I needed was to receive the grace that was already right there. I was the one who had created the wall between me and him.
So it's kind of like we were talking about the Proverbs 31 woman, is that it is not that she's running around doing all this stuff at once. She's coming into her own light and her own grace. There's a theological construct that this may be over years, a lifetime, that she does this, rather than she does this all
Mhm.
all in one day. And what I heard you saying earlier was, I was showing up at the altar call, I'm reading the books, I'm going to the Bible study, I'm working so hard, that you were missing God right in front of you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm. And that's what a lot of the women that I work with find is, I'm doing everything for everybody and I am miserable, and I'm making the people around me miserable.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And our hearts start off so well. Like it's so often it's because we want to honor our spouses, tend to our children, love, serve, give. But what we can so often miss is, you know, that story about Mary and Martha, where Martha's scampering around and doing everything, and Mary's sitting at Christ's feet. Christ said Mary chose the better. And it's not that we don't make a nice meal, serve our people, tend to the home fires, or go out and work, or whatever it is. It's the orientation. Christ wants our orientation to be towards him. And in that way, because if you look at Proverbs 31, Martha looks a lot more like that lady than Mary does. But the difference is that Martha was coming from a place of scarcity and lack. Someone's got to do it. Who's going to do it but me? I need to do it. Whereas Mary came and got the fullness first. And don't you think, I mean, I just kind of laugh, because when you look at the intersection of that moment with all the loaves and fishes stories, it's like, here's Martha scampering all around when she's got a God who can literally like take a fish and bread and put it on the table and it feeds everybody.
Don't you see Martha double hipping it? Well, who's going to do it, Jesus? You brought these 12 men in, and there's probably hangers on out there. And what's your plan here? I need you to have a plan.
Yep.
and and that's the joke. Tell God
Yes.
your plan, and have him laugh, because I can just see that scene where I would be Martha. I'd be like,
Oh, yes.
okay, just give me the plan on who's going to take care of this, because she's sitting over here, and one, I'm jealous, two, you're right, I'm coming out of
Yes.
scarcity and lack, and three, I'm like, who will I be if I don't perform, if I don't take care
That's
of all
right.
these people? Then my neighbors will talk about the bad host that I am, and they'll tell people and
Hmm.
all this. Because in the beginning, I wasn't centered up enough. And so I think
Hmm.
that's why we really resonate with the Martha. And I love that
Oh,
you
I
bring up
know.
the Proverbs 31 is so much similar to that, unless you look at what it was really designed for.
That's right.
But talk a little bit more about that Mary heart, and she considers the field, and how you bring all that together in the group that you run.
Yeah, so it's a blend of two different things. It's a blend of heart's posture, and then the parable of the talents. This idea of faithful in little and set over more. And the parable of the talents, for those who don't know, is the story where the master comes to the three servants, and he's going away for a long period of time, and he gives them money to tend to. And the one who's given 5 talents produces 10, and the one who's given 2 talents produces 4 total, so both double. And then the one who was given 1 talent basically said, I knew you to be a hard man. You gathered where you didn't sow, and you took what wasn't originally yours, and so I just hid your talent away and I did nothing with it. And he's cast out. The other 2 are given equal, they're both given a blessing. Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in little, I will set you over more. Enter into the joy of your master. And so what I feel like the Lord has kind of led me into, and I'm still very much in a season of holding everything before him and saying, what exactly do you want me to offer to the women that you put in my life? But what I know now is, he has brought me to the place in my life that I am now because he gave me little things to be faithful in. And it is through that exercise of doing a little bit every day. I'm going to get up tomorrow. Okay, the kids woke up at 5 a.m. There was no quiet time. I had 1 minute on my knees before they came and interrupted, and, diapers to change and people to feed. But I'm going to come again tomorrow. It's those daily practices that are so little that make profound eternal differences. And through that, we become the women that he has called us to be. We become women of courage. We become women of conviction and bravery. And for me, I felt like for years I was mad at myself because I wanted to be brave with my life. I wanted to be courageous and faithful and interesting and impactful, and all these things that were like, yeah, I want to do that. And I would kind of view it almost like throwing myself off a cliff. Lord, tomorrow I'll be so brave. Just wait. And he's sitting there going, just show up, just like choose not to fight with your husband about, whether you're putting onions in the chili or not. Just choose that. Like, let's start
Right.
there. Like,
Right.
and that through that, it becomes so much bigger. But it takes, like you were saying, years, decades, maybe generations. What if what I do today impacts my daughter, and then she impacts her daughter, and on and on. And then 6, 7 generations out, we got some missionaries, and we got some people who are doing these like brave, bold, courageous things, but it started with not fighting over onions in the chili. We need to bring it down to these bite-sized.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I
Not
love
like
onions.
I'm speaking from experience or anything.
I know. And I think that's what makes that verse of, older women should not that either one of us are old.
No, 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 no.
Mature women should teach younger women, is that there are some things that matter less when you're filled with the Spirit, when you're not seeking the performance love, when you know where to turn, when you're hungry, angry, lonely, tired, all those things,
Yes.
and you're not dependent on that external to fill you. I have another one about, fill your own cup so that you can fill other people's,
Oh, yes.
get that in you. And where we start is, have you had a positive thought about the person in recovery? Are you able to think back to a time when it was good, and then take that positive thought and maybe say, I love you? Or if you can't say that, say, hey, how you doing today? Or even just to, serve a meal without criticism. It
Yes.
is as simple as, okay, I like onions. He doesn't like onions. I'm going to separate into 2 pots. I'm going to make
Yes.
this one with onions and that without onions. So that positive communication, it's not fake it till you make it. It's my Bible's underneath a whole bunch of stuff, but go to the scripture and see how much he loves us,
That's right.
so that you can start putting that out there. Now,
Mhm.
you've had this whole corporate life, busy, go, 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 demand, all these types of things. You're still really busy. How are you supporting the women in your group? What does that look like in
Yes.
She Considers the Field?
So typically what it looks like is I come on and do a quick live video about something that the Lord has impressed on my heart. I'm a reader. I'm always reading books. I really love business books. And so I kind of pull in this more secular, like natural concept, and I bring it into the spiritual realm. For example, Atomic Habits, The Slight Edge, Brene Brown's work. These are all really foundational conversations that are going on in the larger world about how do we be faithful? How do we be brave with our lives? And these are things that the church, we need these conversations, because ultimately these folks have grabbed hold of truths that really are biblical truths. Atomic
Mhm.
Habits, how do I be faithful in little things? It's the parable of the talents. And then he systematizes how to build habits. Well, imagine if every woman in that group took that tool and built a quiet time that was really powerful, where every
Mhm.
morning, in my habit, it's easier now that my youngest is 5 years old, but every morning when I walk out of my room, I know where I'm going. And it's to my little spot on the couch where I have my Bible and my journal and my pens and my, little like cozy light and my blanket. And it's my time with God. And that was built because there was a time where I said, enough's enough. I'm tired of not having a rhythm around quiet times. And I'm going to, like, this year, the only thing I'm focusing on is doing that. But I think for so many of us, we start to reach a point where it's like, gosh, I've been a Christian for like 15, 20 years and I don't have a quiet time. And then we feel embarrassed and we start to hide. And then we don't tell anybody, I don't know how to have a good quiet time. What does that look like? So I'm like, forget it. Let's just have this conversation. How do you build a good quiet time? What does it look like to be kind and gracious to your husband today when you're going through a really difficult time? And so it's a little bit free form in there, but that's just kind of my personality. So encouragement, we do have bi-monthly calls where we're going through a book together, and then we'll see where else God leads it from there. We've just been around for about 7 or 8 months so far, so we're just getting this thing started.
Nice. And that's one of the things that we talk about too, is structure. If you're giving
Yes.
away everything to everybody, trying to save everybody else, which we know we're not their savior, we're
That's
not the
right.
person that does that, but we have to have the authenticity and integrity in ourselves to say, I do have needs. There
Yes.
are things that God has built me with needs. It's not that I think it's a misread of the gospel to say I've got to be selfless all the time. Then
That's
you
right.
just become a dry, empty well. So these
Hmm.
needs, and setting in that structure, setting in that
Yes.
simple structure, so that when you do come to the chili pot and the onions are being questioned, it doesn't become this roaring, roaring
Hmm.
fire, that
That's
you're
right.
taking these very simple steps. So, Anna, thank you so much. How would people find you? Where are they looking for you? What does that look like?
Yeah, so right now the best way to connect with me is through the She Considers a Field group, which I'll give you the link for that, Tanya. And then I'm also on Instagram as well. And from there, whatever else I build in the coming weeks and months, we'll be able to find each other through either of those two channels.
Fantastic. Well, I really look forward to your podcast. I know that's going to be really great. For my audience, her little vignettes, her little reels are extremely peaceful. They're great to listen to in the evening as you are winding down. Not that I suggest taking the phone into the bedroom. That's a atomic habit that I am. The phone stays in the office. Tanya goes into the
That's
bedroom.
right.
Those types of things. But thank you so much for this wide-ranging discussion, everything from idols to caring for yourself to making these small little habit changes. Really appreciate you, Anna, and glad you could spend a little time with us as we're doing women's health.
Thank you, Tanya. It's great to be here.